So let's take a look at the differences in the GI system of children and compare that with the GI system of adults. So first of all, at birth, the infant's GI system is very immature. This is in part due to the fact that in utero, as the fetus was growing, the placenta was really responsible for providing nutrients and removing waste for the infant. So there was really very little activity taking place in the GI system. At birth, that growth and development begins to take place. Up until about 6 weeks of age, the infant has no voluntary control over their swallowing mechanisms. Their stomach capacity is very small as a newborn, and I have a slide here in this brief presentation that kind of gives you just some estimates about the stomach volume and capacity in children of various ages. One of the other classic things about infant GI systems is that their peristalsis or motility is much greater or faster than it is in older children. And that manifests itself in the fact that the children need to have small frequent feedings and have increased frequency and liquid consistency of stools. So everything just moves through a little bit more quickly. And so they need to be fed more frequently because they're getting rid of the waste much more frequently. Their lower esophageal sphincter is somewhat relaxed. And we see that manifested as these young infants vomiting, or not even vomiting, I'm sorry, spitting up after feeds. So they can regurgitate those small amounts, very normal. Oftentimes people will say, do you have a burp cough? And that's why. Sometimes they'll have those wet regurgitations. And that's because of that relaxed esophageal sphincter. Infants have a deficiency of several enzymes, and therefore they do not have enough enzymes to really aid in digestion until they're about 4 to 6 months of age. So what you'll see is a lot of abdominal distension and gas develop, and that is very common in young infants until they reach about 6 months of age, when they have enough of those enzymes. Liver function is immature in the beginning, and after several weeks of life, it will begin to develop the ability to excrete bile and conjugate bilirubin. By the second year of life, they have the ability to or have fairly mature digestive processes, and their stomach capacity has increased well. And by 18 months of age, it's important to know that infants at this, or young toddlers at this stage of the game, do have the sensation of their rectum having stool in it or being full. And that's important because that enables them to have a little bit more physical control over some excretory functions. So they can hold it a little bit better. It's not as spontaneous. This slide just shows that parents need to be reminded that young infants have a small stomach, and that over time, while our stomachs grow, we need to remember that they cannot tolerate large volumes of feed and therefore need to be fed much more frequently. And finally, I just wanted to touch briefly and remind everyone on how we assess the GI status of a child. First of all, we are always inspecting the abdomen for size and shape. Are there any distended areas or protrusions like a hernia, especially in the umbilical or inguinal area? We want to auscultate for bowel sounds in all 4 quadrants, as we would with any other patient. We can palpate to determine how soft or firm the abdomen is. Children who are very full of stool and are constipated or very full of air, sometimes we can actually palpate loops of bowel in there, either with stool in them or air in them. And we will palpate the umbilical ring if the child has an umbilical hernia, and we will talk about that a little bit more in class. We will palpate the umbilical ring to determine its size. We will look in the mouth. We will watch for oral secretions. There are some disease processes that will have an increase or excessive oral secretions, and that's because the child can't swallow them. We will look for cleft lip and palate. If they don't have a cleft lip, they may have a cleft palate, and then we need to palpate, take a look sometimes to even diagnose that. We want to evaluate nutrition, and with that determine, is the child vomiting with feeds? How much are they spitting up? Do they have projectile vomiting? What does that vomit look like? How much are they eating? What are they eating? All of that is valuable and important information. And then finally, we need to look at the stool of infants. What is the consistency of it, or of anyone, infants and children. What's the color? What's the consistency? Is there a foul odor? Different colored stools can mean very different things, and it's important that we really kind of get all of that information so that we can put a more comprehensive and complete picture of a child's GI status in place.